Hello and welcome to the M&A Science Podcast. This podcast is part of a mission to rethink how M&A is done. The old school seller-led approach, it's dead. Buyer-led M&A is all about strategy, alignment, and efficiency, putting value creation at the center of every deal. And let's be real, it's not just about closing the deal, it's about making it successful. We uncover what truly works in M&A by learning directly from the best. I'm your host, Kison Patel, founder and CEO of Deal Room and chief scientist here at M&A Science. Joining me today is Scott Clawson, chairman and CEO of Culligan International, a global leader in consumer water services and solutions. Under his leadership, Culligan has transformed from a legacy water treatment company into a $3.3 billion global platform through strategic turnaround, operational focus, and a highly programmatic M&A approach. With nearly 300 acquisitions and operations in over 50 countries, Scott has built a true M&A machine while maintaining a sharp focus on purpose-driven growth. Today, we're going to talk about activating a programmatic M&A engine that scaled Scott's company 10x in under a decade. He'll share tactical insights on balancing organic and inorganic growth and how capital partners like Advent and BDT have shaped the journey. Scott, how are you doing today?
Great. Good to be here. Fellow Chicagoan. Awesome.
Thanks for hosting. And,
I know it.
Culligan global headquarters here just outside of Chicago and around O'Hare.
We got some planes coming by. It makes it easy to get in and out of town. And so it's a pleasure to be together. I look forward to our conversation here.
I got to tell you, your office is like the best tasting water I've ever had.
It better be. Let's try this together. Oh, yeah. That's good water. That's one thing you don't have to worry about here.
Something you got to appreciate, too.
Exactly. I'll tell you more.
Can we kick things off a little bit about your background?
Sure. I have a little bit of a background similar to you. Small town. I came from a small town in Indiana, very small. I'm not sure how small yours was.
But I had 25,000 in little town Nebraska.
I knew it was in Nebraska. 5,000 in Batesville, Indiana, and grew up there and started my career really in operations after undergraduate in finance, and then went to business school. And then one of my first jobs was actually doing business development in Central and Eastern Europe, and that was a great experience. Then wanted to run a business and decided to join Danaher. And I was being interviewed by one of their senior executives, very senior. And he was asking me about my M&A background and business. And I said, I want to really run a business here. And he's like, no, you really need to get to know how we do M&A and business development. And I said, no, I've done that. I just did that here and there. And he looked at me and said, not the way we do it. And as you know, Danaher is a very respected company in M&A. So I worked at Danaher, spent some time there, then did my first private equity deal with Centerbridge Partners. That was in 2007, an agriculture business in Illinois, and partnered with them. That went really well. And after that, ended up here at Culligan, and joined in 2012, and that's been my journey up to this point in Culligan. And I'm someone that understands really complex business models and international, and both direct and dealer businesses, and it's just been a great career so far for me. One I've learned a lot into along the way.
How about the Culligan story? Can you walk me through what the turnaround Culligan story and how do you set the stage for your M&A strategy?
Sure. I'd love to. When I joined Culligan in 2012, let me tell you first a little bit about Culligan. We provide healthy, safe, soft water to millions of people around the globe.
Delicious.
And exactly, that's good. And we do it throughout the day, whether you're at home, at a gym, at your office. At a hotel, it just doesn't matter. We do it through all types of products, whether it be a really great pitcher to water filtration devices and solutions at the office, and of course a lot at home. And it helps us, eliminate a lot of single-serve plastic in the world because it's all filtered, just like you're getting today. When I started in 2012 at Culligan, it was really a turnaround story at the start because it had been over-leveraged, and really we bought it in a restructuring from CD&R. And it is what at that time was an over 80-year-old company. Started right here in Chicago. You might have seen back in the day a big complex off of Northbrook off the interstate. But first part of what I did is needed to turn around the business in terms of just having it on strong, safe footing, making sure the strategy was right, and so on. And we did that the first 4 years, sold the company to Advent. We did very little to no M&A at that time, none. But then two things came together that had us start this programmatic M&A machine. The first one's a little different than what you may have heard before. I literally is on vacation with my family in the Bahamas, pretty remote barrier island where there's not a lot of commercial stuff on the beaches. You could go to this part of that and be really remote. And there was a huge amount of plastic on the beach, single serve, other stuff, not from hotels. And I'm sitting there saying, all right, this is ridiculous. I have a daughter who's always on me about she won't drink out of plastic. And I looked at our business and said, we're not that big in drinking water, yet it's a big emerging trend. And then when we sold to Advent, they were very interested to grow the company both organically and inorganically. And that's how our programmatic M&A machine is what I like to call it started. And we really then put a lot of time, effort, money, analysis into setting up the programmatic M&A machine in 2016. And that was the start of what has now been over 300 plus deals. It started in basically 2016, 17.
Well, was there a shift in the business model? Was it more like the core business was water treatment, and then when you saw the plastic bottles, it shifted towards... Exactly. We were bigger in water treatment, and that's still a great business for us. But we saw this unique opportunity to take the brand and expand it in water treatment. Now, we were in water treatment some, but not in offices, not in hotels, not in restaurants. So what we did was we did a lot of strategic work, which frankly, any M&A, programmatic M&A machine should start with making sure you have the right strategy and target markets and product lines around it. And that we did not do that fast. It took us 6 to 9 months, a lot of thought, some outside help, going back and forth with Advent and the board. And then I think we nailed it. And we said, oh my gosh, there is a boatload of opportunity, really fragmented, to go after. And at that time, we were in basically 4 countries: Canada, North America, France, and Italy. And the company was healthy and so on. And we said we shifted the strategy to also grow in water filtration for people at home, on the go, and so on. But we needed to get the mass. We needed to acquire some people to help accelerate that because it wasn't our core product line. Yes. So the inspiration started with time at the beach with your daughter and just seeing all the plastic bottles. But I like the point that you're being Canada, it just didn't happen overnight, but you had about a 9-month journey.
Oh yeah.
Can you click into that? Like, I'm just curious because I feel like I'm going through the same thing running a tech business, which I feel like every week, we think our strategy differently.
I give a lot of credit to my board and partners at Advent. And by the way, one of the reasons we picked Advent as our next partner is because they had capability and international experience to do this. So between their involvement, we hired some really good outside consultants. We had to pause some of the things we were doing and say, hold on, let's get our best people working on this. And we did a piece of work that I think is critical to be successful in programmatic M&A. And that is, let's define exactly the guardrails per our strategy. Healthy, safe, filtered water, no plastic. But then, what are the attractive markets? What are their growth rates? What's their penetration versus kind of single serve plastic? And by the end of that work, we had something that even the market, whatever, consultants wouldn't have around. I could say, pick a market, Germany, France, Canada, Mexico, and say, oh, we know what their growth rate is for filtered products here, what it is for softening, and the penetration. And therefore, that was then like, okay, this is a great opportunity. And of course, frankly, we also already had a brand and a really healthy business in it. So that's how we started.
So it was really defining the product, what you're actually going to market with and getting crystal clear on that. And then it was mapping the whole marketplace out of like, where do you want to go? Where do you want to prioritize? You use some consultants?
Yes, we did.
Were they helpful? Did you get good ROI?
Yes. If you consider that we've taken EBITDA from where we are today, a lot more, call it almost 20 times since I originally started, and at least almost 10 times since the Advent deal.
What did they do? How did they add value? I'm always like
Advent
let's start with the consultants, then we'll go back to P firm.
You got to be careful with consultants, but they really helped us along with our kind of analytical team in-house of defining market growth rates, solution or service growth rates, because we're a water service company. Of course, you need some filtration products to do that. And they just helped nail that down. Then we had these are the best 20 markets. These are our guardrails. Okay, how do we start the programmatic M&A? Relative to
really a lot with market study.
Yeah. But then with Advent,
can you name the consulting firm?
What's that?
Can you name the consulting firm?
Yeah, Bain. It was Bain and Amani.
All right.
There was a firm that was a water consulting firm, Amani.
Okay, that's nice.
They're now part of Roland Berger.
I had Hugh MacArthur on here, so I got to put it back to Bain, so that's good.
Yeah. Both of those together
that's
really
good.
helped us.
If it was a bad experience, we wouldn't want to name them. But
exactly.
It's a good,
it's important to get, I think anytime you start, what we did is to be grounded in strategy and guardrails of where it makes sense. Or else somebody does M&A in an area that's a dog, right?
So we got the market studies, could help expanding that with the consulting firm. And then the P firm, what do? Do they help anything with strategy?
Well, Advent was tremendous. They helped and the board, we had independent directors on the board to make sure we had this strategy defined, well thought out, and targeted. And then they were very helpful in setting up the programmatic M&A machine, along with Amit Shah, who runs that for me globally in terms of the pipeline work, integration, transactional and integration playbook. Much of that we had from my background because I came out of companies where I learned it myself and did it well. But on our first, 10, 20 deals, they were very helpful and active, and they had people on the team. They do that a lot, and they helped kind of get our people up to speed as well.
So they're really helping with the process, the execution. I guess I'm wondering, like, how much of do they actually help you with in-house? I know some of these bigger PE firms will have like a portfolio support like a portfolio operating group.
And I've been with several that are very, very different, from Centerbridge to Advent to now BDT MSD. So they helped significantly on the initial deals of the transactional side of things, analysis and so on, and a little bit on the integration playbook, but we pretty much had that nailed. They did not help much on the actual pipeline work. We built that up in-house. And then as time went on, they would only really support us on deals that were pretty sizable, right? And now today, that was back in 2017 when we set that up. Today, we have zero help from I wouldn't say zero help, but very little on what they would a lot of PE firms would do would be have somebody on the deal and do an analysis and all that. We generally do it all in-house. If it's a bigger transaction or so on, we can always lean on them for help or review and so on.
Are there any other areas that you found PE to be really helpful? And I'm curious about this too, Scott, because like I'm kind of at that stage with our business. I bootstrapped it to about 10 million revenue, and now I'm starting to think about doing a minority recap. So I'm starting to date the PE firms. And then it's interesting. So I'm like paying attention to their operating model. How well do they support their portcos? But I guess part of it too is the like less ownership of this capital structure. We got a partner that can help you think through debt and equity balance and what other levers you can use. Did you find anything of like that in terms of?
Yes, I would say significant value add with all three of my private equity partners, Centerbridge Capital Partners for 2 deals, Advent International, and BDT MS. And each in somewhat different ways, but I'll describe where. First and foremost, they are excellent, just what you said, Kison, about challenging and looking at your business and what are the strategic opportunities to really change the game or add value. And they can be thought leaders on that. So that's the first thing. Second thing is they challenge, right? They push, they ask questions, and that's great for us, right? It makes us stronger, especially if you have a management team that understands that's partnering versus seeing ghosts and things like that. So they would immediately, I think, help look at and say, how can we grow this? How can we add more value? Have you thought about that? And that's been really value. And then third, they actually will apply resources at times, if you want, to help fix something or improve something. And look, I'll give you a great example of that. That was honestly one of my harder, darker days as a CEO. And this goes back to 2009 and 10, my first PE deal. A lot on the line, right? First time CEO of a PE-backed company, standalone CEO. And I had a big issue in Brazil. And I was in Brazil, a lot of problems, distrust, foul play, whatever. And I was down there with one member of my team, and I realized that I was like in the gym playing Michael Jordan in basketball. I had no shot of figuring this out, not speaking the language, not spending a lot of time down here. And it was in the company, this business unit of ours had a serious financial problem underneath. And I called up the operating partner at Centerbridge on our deal. And I remember it was late at night. I just left, and it just kind of hit me. I'm done here. I'm out of my league. And he immediately, over the next week, got partners, worked his network in Brazil, and like a week, he flew down there, and he had seen messes before, and like 2 weeks later, we had an interim person on site, boom, boom. You know what I mean? He was on it with me, and it was like, oh my gosh.
Wow.
To this day, when I see this gentleman, I look and say, thank you. Now he worked his network. So they really can help you improve businesses and ops, and they help you drive the value creation plan.
So capital structure, helping shape your strategy, helping you sort of build M&A as well, challenging you, maybe even driving some urgency to keep you a little on edge and motivated.
Having the right independent board.
And then the resources, being able to actually help you out.
And then, like in BDT MSD's case, very strong relationships around the world. And I can give you an example to there how they've literally helped us in our programmatic M&A.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when we look at this, you've done like 300 deals, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about when you started this process. You got the strategy nailed down. You started building out some of the pieces. The PE firm initially gave you some of that start, and then you got to essentially scale it out from there. Was there any other essential pieces to really get that right?
Yes. Pipeline. I think one of the biggest opportunities in programmatic M&A is how companies set up the pipeline resources. And I noticed this early on, and then how you incentivize people. But if you don't have pipeline, and it has to be not the data and getting all the targets, who's actually going to talk to them? Who's going to visit them? And is it the right person? And what we did that was hugely successful, that I don't think enough companies do, is find pipeline resources that are in our industry that all they care about is pipeline. They don't want to do a bunch of due diligence. They don't want to be trying to do the contract work or integrations. They are rewarded on get those relationships, find the deals, and meet the people and get them to a table to an LOI. After that, they can take off. And they're hard to find because a lot of people want to be involved in everything. And we found an individual at the start that is an all-star at that. And I give him a lot. And then he got a couple people more. So that helped. Of course, it's once you have the strategy, you need the guardrails, you need pipeline, and of course a transactional and integration playbook we put in place. And then we went around the world and set this up in these 20 markets.
Easy peasy.
Well, not easy, but it can work.
How? Okay, I like the pipeline focus because it's tried and true. Like even running a software company, every management meeting I have is all pipeline. You found this formula of like this right profile of a person that could do well at building pipeline. But how? Because you've scaled this out across about 50 countries now.
We're in that many. Our M&A, programmatic M&As in pods around the world. So, we have over 8 areas where they're operating, a country or a cluster of countries. Yeah.
This is where I'm really intrigued because how do you scale that out? Do you say, hey, this is the profile, and then you just start hiring those organically in these different markets?
Yes.
Against your strategy?
Yes. Now, first, we got to be in that market. So, and in our case, we were in basically 4 countries. So we had to get to these other 20 countries through generally the first acquisition is a beachhead, and then we would, in that area, build out a small pod of the programmatic M&A machine.
But you'd hire that BD person first.
Exactly. So what we first did is we hired one in the U.S. and one in Europe, and their job was pipeline. It's a certain type of person. It's someone that really has strong interpersonal capabilities, knows how to get to know people, can work with our teams and others, and they would go meet with and target the deals that, of course, came out of our research of target companies. And they would help us find those deals that would help us get into those markets. And then once we were in that market, let me give you a good example. Southern Europe, there was Iberia, we didn't have any real business in. It's a great target market. Portugal, Spain, filtered water. The water isn't great. They don't, plastic isn't growing that much there. So we first, through our kind of corporate pipeline guy, found a business in Portugal, fairly sizable, purchased it. Their team stayed on with us. And then within that, we said, oh, this is a great area, but they need a local pipeline person. They need an integration lead. They need transactional, kind of comes from their finance team. But we have that playbook. So that's how we did it. But I'll give you, and then they've since in that area probably done, I don't know, more than several acquisitions. Wow. And now we're basically, one of the leading companies in Iberia over like 5 years. And if you go there today, it's like they run their own, it's like its own little P deal. They're running their own programmatic M&A. But what's interesting is, I'll give you another example. Then we're in another country and I'm visiting it. And they're not doing any, and they're stable. They're growing organically. They have a good team. Of course, you want that when you start. It's like, why aren't you guys doing more deals? Well, it's because the finance lead is in his part-time trying to talk to some of the water service companies. They're asking their GMs to try. They don't have time. They're trying to make their budget. So I was there and I said, no. Go hire the M&A pipeline guy. If he can help, do the transactional part, great. And what do you think happened a year later? They hired the person like 6 months later. Like a year later, 6 months after he started, they got like deals flowing. Why? Because that's his job, right? And then you want to incentivize people to do it right. So it's remarkable if you just get the steps, which we've outlined, and get them going in a place, it can really work. And as long as you have the incentive set up.
What's the incentive look like? Is it like almost, I think it's our sales reps, right? You get a base pay and then you close deals and you're going to get kickers for that.
Yeah.
Or is this?
There's a hidden gem in this. Honestly, again, you tell me, I don't think many businesses comp this right. And it's, yes, pipeline person and deal guys, go get it done, reward them for their performance. Maybe they get some bonuses for getting these deals done. But how do you get the business to, the business has to then own due diligence and integration. Yeah. And we have great playbooks for those. And most companies do. But I've been at a business before, we can't, this is one of our leaders, let's call him Bob. This literally happened several years ago. We're missing our budget some because of these acquisitions. And I get it. They should. I mean, it's hard to do a bigger acquisition and then, it does take your eye off the ball. But in the incentives part, what we have done is incentivize the BU leaders and their teams with it helping their budget if they do small programmatic M&A. So if you have a budget of $10 million, but you get these deals done and within year, they give you X amount of EBITDA, that helps your budget. And it wasn't planned, meaning they could be missing their budget by $1 million, but they just bought a couple companies that make up that $1 million, and that's like free budget money. We're happy because it's accretive. They're happy because it's like, hey, programmatic M&A can help us make or beat our budget, ideally beat it, and pay our whole business unit team more. So that's a powerful thing. I don't know how many companies do that. I think it's probably what they generally do is like, oh yeah, go get these deals done. You're a stockholder, so therefore you'll be rewarded. But what's really this is in our blood we do call it the M&A machine at Culligan because it's just natural. And of course they're going to be rewarded as shareholders. But if you're in, France or you're in Germany or you're in Latin America, you have a tremendous amount of pressure to make your budget. But the minute we say, if you go buy people, that's plus to your budget. Yeah,
it adds right to it.
And then what we say is if you buy them, let's say you buy somebody in November, we give them credit for half the year of the LTM. Now we got everybody lined. Pipeline guy, businesses like this helps us grow and make money as a shareholder. It helps us make our budget. Now, of course, they have to have these elements in place, which well, the integration playbook and the due diligence playbook. That's kind of the easy part.
The biz dev person, is their kicker based on hitting the LOI or at close?
Their kicker is based on a couple things. In some instances, they're on a whatever bonus program of the business or corporate they set in. So like if you're the biz development person, again, in France, however France does, you get that. We could give them a kicker for a deal or two. But globally, what we do is we have a matrix. Target of how much EBITDA we want to buy, multiple. And it's just formulaic that, let's just say we have a target to buy. I'm making up numbers. We do more than this 10 million of EBITDA. And our target is 10 million at 7.5 times. And then if you buy 10 million at less than 7.5, you're getting an accelerator to your your target.
I like
if
that.
you buy, it's perfect. It's like perfectly
And
aligned.
this is for the biz dev person to get.
This is for the biz dev people to get. And by the way, it's also for those at it could be those at corporate,
yeah.
or in some pod, call it France. That this is mainly used for biz dev and the corporate resources.
I like it because you're incentivizing them to do good deals, not just deals.
Exactly. If you pay too much, it hurts you.
Right.
Now, we know our market. We've been doing this for a while. We kind of know. I mean, if you've done 300 plus deals, you're aware of things, and we have huge credibility coming to us because of our reputation of how we treat people after deals. But if you do that plus this, somehow reward the business unit leader. But you know what? When you reward the business unit leader, Kison, by saying, "Oh, if it goes well, you may get some extra bonus at the end of the year." That's not. That's
just
not,
like count it all towards their whole business.
It kind of like it can work or not. But if you have it part of your incentive program, where it's been now going on for us 6 or 7 years, it's like, okay, everybody wants to do programmatic because it helps them beat budget.
Yep.
And then if they beat budget, they make more money, and they're doing. Now, if they do a big deal, we don't let that, like, if it's a really big deal, that's kind of a different thing. A business that's doing 10 million, let's say they do a $8 million merger, we're not going to have them probably blow through that. But remember, we're an M&A machine on water service companies where they're pretty small and programmatic, and that's the best way to do it.
Well, if they did the bigger one, I mean, is that just completely different? Is it just like here's like a whole business case and you just have a whole different? It's
part of that grid for the M&A teams and so on. And then for the business, we would have to set up a special program for that year.
Can you walk me through the overall structure of this M&A organization? Because I've worked with a number of teams, and I feel like everybody's just structured differently. There's a lot of ways to do it. But what's interesting is you're doing this on essentially a global scale, and there's this balance between, like the biz dev you describe, having that localized, but then when you go through diligence and you go through integration, I'm also thinking through like those processes where, hey, maybe there's some parts that you do want to localize, but maybe there's some parts that you want centralized, and just trying to put that in mind of how you actually do deals with, like, how do you actually structure the team to make this efficient from all you learned over the hundreds of deals?
Yeah, this is a great question, and there are various ways to do it. We are set up where the corporate M&A team, and Amit Shah, who leads that, is responsible for the setup of resources in the regions. 1, to make sure the strategy and guardrails are what we talked about. 2, 3 is that then the playbooks are in good shape and kind of followed, which is we have 2 playbooks: due diligence playbook and integration playbook, right? And that's it. But everything else is in the region or the business unit. And then they are there's just like several of them that then have pipeline targets. They use these playbooks. Of course, any bigger deal goes up to Amit. He sees almost every one, but he's not having to prove a small deal in wherever because it's small, and he sees it because he's always tracking it. And he has our multiple versus price and works that. So we really stay grounded in our strategy around water services and then the guardrails. And that is part of corporate's job. But pipeline, execution, due diligence, all part of the business unit. Now, look, some of our business units or clusters are 50 to 100 million of EBITDA. But I don't want there's not somebody flying in from around once we get it going. That's their own programmatic machine. It's running in France. It's running in Iberia.
You're almost like treating them like a portco of your own. Like
and we have common themes, and for sure, because we at Culligan run quite decentralized. And it's also with the common purpose of healthy, safe water and so on. But that's also been a reason why we get a lot of deals. People trust us. I can have people call up. Just call up these people. They were at their own company. They're happy here. Talk to them about how it went and how much money they made later or not. And so deals come to us that way. And it's because we treat sellers, with respect and credibility and so on. And, it reminds me of like in Italy, how we got our machine going, if you want to hear a good story about that.
Love to.
So there was a business we wanted to buy, and Advent helped us look at it. And I kind of came in at the 11th hour when they were going to go another way. I met the two Italian owners in an airport hotel, and the meeting kept going on, and we built the relationship. They'd met our team, but they were really headed the other way. And I committed to them that they would keep running their business, that we would keep it in their location. And this all made enough business sense that they would have the ownership of the R&D of these unique product lines. And we held true to that to this day. And it's a little bit maybe outside our structure of what would be, you'd look on paper, well, why is, but the business has gone from 5 million to over 50 million. It is one of our, super performing assets in terms of technology. This was an area where there was also a technology-oriented company. And that's just an example of, that spread. So now, what do you think happened to all these other owners in Italy that when we started doing more programmatic M&A, they know this firm. They'd call them up, and these guys are like, you can trust Culligan. They haven't changed what they said we would do. And they've invested. And of course, there's deals that you're what you're going to do is a little different. Maybe you're integrating and getting a lot of synergies. But if you do what you say you're going to do, and you become known as a programmatic M&A, and you can put points and dollars of return on the board for people that can have fun as part of it. But that generally only happens, in my view, when it's decentralized. If you're a big corporate behemoth,
interesting.
I don't think it works.
Very decentralized. You're like highly decentralized.
Well, I'm a firm believer. My leadership DNA, whether it's taught from my dad long ago to Danaher to everything else I've learned, is empowerment. You want to push that down as far as you can. And of course, we have systems around, again, integration, due diligence, and the transaction. That's controlled. But people can learn that and get it going. So we have all these business units with a common theme around the world performing quite well. And it's fun.
This takes hard work to build that reputation, and I like what I'm hearing about the approach. I wanted to ask you about buyer-led M&A, because I've been publishing a lot of content around buyer-led M&A, and it's something I've observed from watching organizations like yours that may start off with a process they stumbled on. It's a seller-led process, but then once you start running M&A at scale, you have to be buyer-led. I think you told a lot of it already, where you have to have such a clearly defined strategy, that there's a clear criteria. Now you've got folks that are proactively finding businesses that fit that criteria versus just engaging bankers and being reactive towards it. But what I was curious about was, like, as you move through that actual execution, decentralized sounds like a lot of it you really keep localized. Are there other things that you do to sort of fit that theme of being buyer-led to ensure the success of the deal post-close?
I believe the main one is having core competency in terms of talent that are doing the pipeline work. And that helps then you be buyer-led because you are implementing that with relationships. And that, to me, that's a key. I'm on several boards and I've talked a lot about M&A, and generally I'll sit there and just say, well, like, how are you going to get programmatic M&A when you got, take Ahmed, you got people like Ahmed and deal people that know how to do due diligence and transactions. calling once in a while for dollars and all that. So building that competency and then having the credibility, I do think are the main key. But without the resources, it's like, I'll give you another great example about buyer-led M&A. And that happened in a region of our business that's also a business unit within a business unit here in the U.S. So they had a pretty good pipeline person, trying to be buyer-led, calling people and so on. But that was it. And so I said, no. Who do we know in the industry? Retired. I mean, these are companies of 1 to 2 million of revenue. And it's like, oh, so-and-so, we bought his business 2 years ago. What's he do? I knew the guy. I said, so yeah, let's get that guy going part-time. And all he wanted to do is go back to his relationships. He's tired of just sitting around playing golf. He's buyer-led, and he's walking in somebody's dealership, right? So you need to do those, I think, type of things are the key. And then get your team, GMs want to be buyer-led because they get rewarded for it.
It's like you have to start from the early in the process to have just proactive culture. Then it allows you to sort of build that as you progress through the deal, like the same thing, like doing your diligence and controlling your timelines and how do you plan for integration to make sure that goes smooth.
Exactly. I think there's a whole process on that front end, and that then instills the culture. I like what you said, the culture of being buyer-led.
How do you keep things to fit Culligan versus like straying out of your guardrails?
That's a lot of the review process early on deals as they get to LOI. A lot of that I give a ton of credit to Amit Shah, who leads our global M&A, and his regional leads to catch if people get outside the guardrails. And believe me, if you're rewarded on M&A, you will want to do some deals at times that may not be as strategically fit. And for our case, water services that are growing in these very big markets, but narrow. And like, I'll give you an example in water. There's companies that do hydro panels that pull water vapor from the air and remineralize it and turn it into water. It's very early on, right? Sounds pretty cool, right?
Yeah, very cool.
Sounds like Culligan should be in that. We had these, devices that we can put out in the middle of nowhere, but that's not really, right? That's not our core yet, right? It's early stage. It may or may not work. It's a different kind of segment. I've had to say no to certain things. I don't really need too much anymore because the team does. So that's how we do it. And that you do need to have that discipline somewhere. And we do it by, these are the attractive markets. These are the guardrails, which are water services in these areas or a tech deal. But we're not doing VC too early stage, and we're not doing something in some geography we haven't targeted yet.
But like this new emerging innovation, like do you sit there and say, hey, maybe we should have 5-10% of our resources?
We've done that, yeah.
So you sort of look
We're
at
in
that.
2 or 3 deals that we'll take a early position to bet on it, but not have to overly run it. And some are working and some we're going to probably lose our investment on.
So there's a discipline to stay focused, but then there's this view of let's not let things get away from us.
Yep.
So we'll sort of resource allocate accordingly.
Exactly. We're a little blessed because in this regard, because any new technology ends up having to come our way if they want to get to the markets, because we won the ground game.
I don't want to pick on the meat here because, obviously you've kept him around long enough that he's must be worthy. But, let's just broadly speaking, for a head of Corp Dev, right? You're CEO building out programmatic M&A. What's a head of Corp Dev should be doing essentially to impress you? Like what's going to make you just hide some, let's put me aside. So it's like, this is a person that's really nailed their role. This is why they've impressed me.
Okay. That's a great question, and it's an easy answer. They're going to understand and do a lot, but a lot of just what we've been talking about. So that's the easy answer. But in addition, they are just really astute and experienced in the parts of the M&A machine we've set up. So if you take Amit, he's really good at the due diligence, transactional, and the hiccup. So he can see that. He can feel it. If it's a real big deal, he's in the middle of it because you can't miss on that stuff. But he also is really great at setting up this M&A machine and being comfortable that they're, in our case, because we do so many deals, that they're in each region as pods and is a great leader about it. And that the success has been excellent at process and playbooks and strategic thought, and then him be able to go deep when needed. And I think that's really important. But I think in general, a lot of corp dev or just M&A leads, they're really good in one area, but they don't have the breadth that's needed to run programmatic M&A, or you want to do it all at corporate. Then in our business, that wouldn't work, right? In some businesses it could, but I'm not a big believer in it.
So leadership is a huge component, being able to build out a process and getting ahead of problems.
Yeah, and being involved in it. So he reports to the board every quarter. He knows where we are in our targets. And
he directly reports up to the board.
Well, he will report out at a board meeting with us.
Oh, wow. So he's okay.
I mean, the value driver of this is huge. So it's not long, but he owns all of that. So when we say we're doing all these deals, he knows every one of them. And, I walked in the other day, walking by his office, and this had come up through a BU, a question about what we needed to pay for a deal. And I was just asked about, and I said, Amit, send me XYZ, the last 8 deals in this area, in these regions, multiple, boom, boom, and just let us know the strategic thought on that. And he's like, 2 hours later, the data, but then he has this strategic thought about it, right? So when a big deal comes up, the differentiator, I think, for us with Amit is he's also very just smart, strategic. We've had him since 2000, and he's my first hire for the programmatic M&A. If you asked him how long it took us to get him, we had to wait we got Advent on board, and he was the first hire. And I always joke with him about it, like, how many deals did you do at IR, Ingersoll Rand? He was like, in the last 6 years, I don't remember, like a couple. And like now, look, he's a star.
I know.
But we don't divert him either. Like, we don't need him. We got other people working on IR. He could do a lot more, but this is great.
I feel like he's got his neck exposed more than you do. I'm starting to feel bad for the guy.
You should take him out on the weekend for sure.
There you go.
I love him.
Hey, do you run across regulatory challenges?
Not generally. No, we're very careful about that.
I just didn't know. Now that's like the talk of the town, especially with all the markets you play in.
We're very aware of and make sure we're adhering to being very sound in those areas.
Let's talk PE. I want to go back to this transition that you went from Advent to BDT as your capital partner. You mentioned that different approaches, like you mentioned Advent wasn't as hands-on, where BDT was more hands-off. Just curious if there's anything else that differed their approach when it comes to supporting the M&A vision you have.
Sure. With both of our last the last 3 partners here at Culligan, Centerbridge, Advent, BDT MST, because they've merged with Michael Dell's office. I was able to really choose our partner in those cases because we had several PE firms around the deal, and that's been a blessing. That's not always happened. And I appreciate the confidence that was given to me to say, we're near the same area of price. Who do you think would be the best partner? Relative to BDT MST, they have added tremendous value in all the general ways, good board members, astute, all those things. But longer term capital, their fund's 13 years, right? They love our type of business, which is compound, grow, keep compounding. We don't have as much time on, plenty of capital, a little less leverage. So their capital timeline and structure has been very positive for us, right? And because of that, that just aligns everyone. And then the type of investors they have are incredible because they are owners of businesses. Their investors tend to be big businesses that were privately held, and that's what they are. They're an investment fund for the private client, right, versus institutional investors. So these are people that did well, make money, so they help a business in a different way, and that's been great. And then they're international. It's like any of the PE firms. They have a network. If I needed any help, I'm one call away from having five people at BDT MSD working on it to get back to us. And of course, they challenge us in all those things. But their relationships around the world have been, I'm telling you, a game changer for us. That generally you don't see as much. For example, we had a fairly sizable acquisition we wanted to do, and BD in certain of these target markets that happen to be in Europe. And when we were getting near the end of putting our deal together, they asked me, is there any market you want us to have a co-investor in more than others? And I said, yes, these two. Within a month after close, we were going to Europe, meeting with a company through their relationships that I would have never gotten. And we were able to buy that company, fairly sizable, only because I think we had a network of people in that company that were invested in BDT, that were really reputable private businesses. And so the seller's like, oh yeah, I know all of these people here in so-and-so country, and I trust them, and I'm going to meet with BDT and Scott. They might not have met with me, right? That's pretty great, right? You don't get that all the time.
So if you had the opportunity to pick your private equity partner, what would the top things be that you would look for?
One, of course, would be the relationship, trust, fit there, and with the people you're working with. That should go without saying. Two would be their alignment to the strategy of the business and the future. Three would be value add to that strategy, push, value add, all those things. Because, and most all will say they do it, but for example, with us, just on this three, we wanted to go more international and needed a firm that would support that. BDT, MSD, Advent did before, they're going to do it. That's their, if I'd gone to some other firm, they may be like, a little cautious here or there. They're like, let's go. So they were going to add a lot of value on that. 4, board. Are they willing to have a strong, independent members of the board? Like, I don't want to have only a bunch of financial investors on my board, right? We want real, my board has partners. Real CEO people on it, right? And some of these investors in them are actually family businesses investors. So they actually made their money by running, you know what I mean? So that's another area. And then how much you want them to be hands-on or not is another, I think, criteria that you want to make sure fits with management.
This is great.
I mean, but those are the things that quickly come to mind that are really important to me. But they need to add value, and those things are where it's at. Relationship,
trust, alignment to strategy.
Challenging and value creation to that strategy. Like if Advent had not pushed me around, I saw the need with that plastic, right? But they then pushed and said, no, let's do work. Let's change this company from a water treatment with some drinking water to a global water service company that takes care of drinking, softening, anywhere you are. And that was because of Advent. And by the way, a couple board members. Wow. A couple board members that were independents.
See, people talk so bad about private equity, and then
I love
some good examples that they're creative. Yeah. And so, okay, what about the other part? I guess this is another one. Let's think like capital allocation, and you got money that you can invest towards organic versus inorganic growth. How do you sort of think through that? And then do and we talked a little bit about the P partner helping with some of the structure in the back end, but on the front end, how are you thinking about capital allocation?
I've evolved over the last 15 years to move more emphasis and capital allocation. I would say emphasis, not exactly dollars, to organic growth. And as you know, the times have changed some around earlier in my career doing inorganic growth, growing EBITDA, being efficient, do great, make a lot of money. Now the best companies are growing organically as well as programmatic. And so I believe you need to be balanced, and if not in today's market, 2025, to have a higher emphasis on organic growth than inorganic. Now, we got inorganic growth nailed, and we call it our M&A machine. But that does come at the expense, if you're not careful, especially if you're doing it fast, of focusing on organic. So our capital allocation looks at both. We grow really well organically. We have for years. And we, of course, spend more capital on that unless we were in a mega deal year than the programmatic M&A. But programmatic M&A alone or M&A alone is not the best recipe for value creation if you don't have organic growth. And that just gets into all of the things I've learned and we do well here at Culligan around the business system and focusing on breakthroughs of organic growth and so on.
Have you seen the risk from over-relying on M&A or synergies to hit performance targets? Oh, yeah,
for sure. And we've experienced it. When we do as much as we have, it's logical that when you do a lot of M&A, that it could take your eye off the ball within these businesses, whether it's one big business or like us, we're a lot of different BUs with the same purpose, right? So we have seen that can happen, and that's where our business system and emphasizing organic growth as much or more than inorganic really is important.
What about the integration efforts? Because I've heard of roll-ups where they're off to a great start, but then integration ends up being the bottleneck. They factor in all these synergies in their models, but then they don't integrate them fast enough. Yeah,
or some of them, they don't integrate it. They're just a roll-up, and then they tell you that they're integrated, and you get burnt there because you find out you just bought a roll-up of 15 different companies.
You got a backlog of integration work to do.
So, that's one of our playbooks. You have to.
Is that part of investing in organic, or is that, just being good at M&A is making sure you budget to integrate the company?
Being good at M&A, make sure you integrate the company, and that separately, I think about it separately, you're investing in organic. Because you know what happens if you do this deal, you have some synergy number. You got to hit that. Everybody, what's the synergy? All right, it's 10 million. You better hit it, right? Okay, that makes the model work, all that. Everything you've done and talked about in your work. But what really happens is, if you're not careful, and this, I've seen this happen. Okay, hit your synergy number. Make sure you do. Your top line suffers some, or you're doing whatever to do, and the capability build underneath isn't happening. So 2 or 3 years down the road, you find out that worked, but we're not growing as much as we should. So that's a more difficult business initiative to do, but that is I think the holy grail is make sure that you're growing organically, doing programmatic, but your numbers are whatever you're growing organically, plus 2 or 3 inorganically. But if you don't, then you lose. I think you hit synergy numbers and lose capabilities, and you've seen that all over the place. Big deals and others. 2 or 3 years later, people the deal's not working out. Part of that is you got to build capability as you do it, and we build that into our model. So one thing we do is and we get the model, and then we say, oh no, what capabilities do we need to do to make sure we integrate well? That could be finance capability. We're buying sometimes family businesses. And we put it in the model, and the model kind of sometimes goes a little bit down and then up.
So this is an area that you want some level of consistency in executing. You're doing like 60 to 80 acquisitions a year. How the hell do you do that across all these geographic regions, different cultures? You know, I can't imagine even having these different leaders on one call understanding each other.
That's the core competency we built. It's a general answer, but that's it's a really good playbook. So like if I brought in Amit Shah and said, just pull it up, give us your integration playbook. It's really good. Now it's not too detailed. We massage it for size of BU, right? Because you can't roll out an integration playbook that has 100 line items for a $500,000 purchase revenue. So you're buying something for, okay, 1 times revenue, whatever. Like they don't need, you got to have, so we have all that figured out. Then we've trained and have good people in the areas. And then the BU leader there locally, wherever they are, has to say, okay, and once in a while they're going up the flagpole saying this integration is too much for this company or too little, but the integration playbook exists really well.
It's all in governance.
It's governance, but it's governance within the pod that then goes up, right?
I'll save the podcast of the meat for another time when we cover, how not to get fired from Corp Dev in a decade role. But you'd love to get just general advice for CEOs or Corp Dev teams that are looking at shift from being opportunistic to really building this repeatable, M&A model. What are the 1 or 2 key things that should make sure they don't screw up?
For those really looking to do great programmatic M&A, there are several important things. First, you got to build the capability and the muscle of the organization. All right. And of course, you need to make sure your core businesses are strong where you do it. And we talked about how to build that capability with Corp Dev, pipeline, and so on. And then you need to ensure, another important point is that you've really mapped out the strategy, the target markets, and so on, so you have strong guide rails. And generally, I think companies do that pretty darn well. And then after that, do you have the playbook for due diligence and transactional close and people that know how to do that? And then integration after and people dedicated to that. And then finally, is it married together with the actual business unit leaders' incentives and desire and comp plans? Because at the end of the day, M&A ends up in a business, especially programmatic. And programmatic M&A always ends up in a business. And so any misalignment of that really hurts. And then if you have that set up and build this culture and DNA, you then have what I like to call the M&A machine. And the reason we call it the M&A machine is it's a flywheel that keeps turning and works on its own with good corporate governance.
Strategy, process, leadership, alignment. Scott, I know we're hitting on time, but I got to ask you, what's the craziest thing you've seen in M&A?
Oh, the craziest one was years ago when in 1995, 96, I was doing M&A, first biz dev job I had. I was the biz dev person in Central and Eastern Europe. And we were looking for partners to make products for Coca-Cola, Pepsi, bottlers in the local market because they wanted to be local. And that was a time when you had a lot of accounting and consultants reaching out, like, we can show you these partners. And I ended up meeting people at a big show that said that a great partner in Belarus that made a bunch of these products happened to be bottle caps. And so we organized a trip, and off I went to Minsk, Belarus. 2 hours, we get to this state-owned factory in the middle of nowhere that, like, in a huge buildings, like football fields of buildings, in the corner are some machines making these products. And it was freezing cold. And I ended up, I'm like, there's no way we're going to be here. But the worst thing about it was, this is in Belarus, and I had to stay at the kind of hotel attached to the company. And it was so cold, I literally took all of my clothes out of my suitcase and was laying them on my covers to add more warmth. And then the next morning for breakfast, they were drinking vodka shots. I'm not kidding. The people trying to sell me on this deal. And I always remember that. I'm like, that was one trip. You know, it's probably 3 hours from Chernobyl or something. That was pretty crazy.
What we go through for the hunt of the deal.
Where we go for the hunt of the deal. There's some.
You don't know until you see it. That's why you got to go see it.
You got to go see it. You got to be out there. There's another one when we were kind of tracking a beachhead and we found out we were losing it. And this was a pretty significant size for us, you know, over 10 million of EBITDA. And it was an owner and his son. He owned the business for 40 years, started it. And I'm like, we were losing it. They were visiting who they were going to sell to in the U.S., this European company. And I said to my team, where are they? And I said, no, one of them knew this seller fairly well and said, I'll meet you at the airport. This happened to be up in Minneapolis. And I stopped whatever they did and flew up there. They gave me 3 or 4 hours before they were going to fly out and just told them why we were a better deal, that they could trust us somewhat. Like I told you before, that we weren't going to change the game on them, that we're Culligan with 90 years of history. And by the time they were getting on their plane, they said, okay, we really like me, frankly, liked our process and committed not to sign with the other company, but to have us visit them the next week. And we ended up buying them a month later. And today they're a fantastic company. But if somebody, that one, it needed me because it was a 65-year-old owner who's like, if I don't get on that plane, we don't own that business today. And I'm not, you know, my team does this a lot more than me. It's not about me. But that was another great story. And especially because that business is, you know, this was several years ago. It's just done great.
That's like the moral of all of M&A. It's about relationship and trust.
It is so much about it. And we've been blessed that we have trust in the market. And when you have trust in the market, then sellers check, right? Now we tell them, call people. Sometimes, you know, you're doing a lot of integration, so that makes it a little different, but it works. So it's been fun. It's been very fun here.
Scott, this has been an awesome conversation. I thank you so much for helping me take the time and helping me become a better M&A scientist.
Well, thank you. Appreciate what you all are doing and the work you're doing. We love it.
Fellow M&A scientist, always welcome hearing from you. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. Let me know what you think of this interview. If you've got other topic ideas, criticisms, I'm here to hear it. Till next time, here's to the deal.